But basically, this is the dilemma of the human race. This is the dilemma of American education.
Hmm.
You know, we our universities all over the world pride ourselves on creating chemicals, and we're not stopping. From what I've read, and I have no idea. I know it's. I've read anything from over 80,000 to 150,000 chemicals, and they're not stopping
Wow.
every year, creating more. And how are they creating these? Because our children are being trained by an education system that is promoting this sort of discovery, this sort of research, this sort of experimentation, to where let's take all the, there's only what, 92 or 94 naturally occurring elements that make up everything known in the universe.
Gary, it's really an honor to have you on the show. I first heard you on Mimi and Chase's The Medicine podcast, and as soon as I heard it, I said, "Mimi, you gotta let me know what the deal is here." I bought an under the sink unit from Greenfield Water, probably the next day, if not the same day, and I haven't looked back. Like, you're the guy, you're the company that I really, really respect, and we're going to go, this is going to be a wide ranging conversation for anybody listening. But for starters, we have this big giant chemical spill up in East Palestine, which is about an hour from my hometown in Pittsburgh. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, is the confluence of the Allegheny River coming from the northeast and the Monongahela coming straight from the east. They merge and create the mighty Ohio River, which drains directly into the Mississippi. And now I'm living in Louisville downstream, and everybody should be thoughtful about a massive chemical spill that is contaminating probably one quarter of all of the waterways in the United States. It might not actually be one quarter, but we won't know until 50 years later. And we're still, finding that plants and insects and frogs and turtles are dying. So I called your son up, Zach, who works within your company, and we negotiated in a whole house filtration system with a structuring. We got the quad flow. We're going big here. So that's a pretty big prompt. But why don't you talk a little bit about maybe what your insights are into this recent spill? This is not an isolated thing, of course, but what do
Yes.
people know about this, and why is water even important?
Right. Yeah. Great question. Just I think it would be beneficial to go back a little farther. As far as why did this happen? We say, oh, it was the government's fault. It was the train company's fault. It was a conspiracy. There's all kinds of stuff going on. But basically, this is the dilemma of the human race. This is the dilemma of American education.
Mm-hmm.
We our universities all over the world pride ourselves on creating chemicals, and we're not stopping. From what I've read, and I have no idea. I know it's. I've read anything from over 80,000 to 150,000 chemicals, and they're not stopping
Wow.
every year, creating more. And how are they creating these? Because our children are being trained by an education system that is promoting this sort of discovery, this sort of research, this sort of experimentation, to where let's take all the, there's only what, 92 or 94 naturally occurring elements that make up everything known in the universe. All the material aspects are made from those. Well, if we could, if we were thinking correctly, utilize those elements to take care of everything we need to do to clean, feed, and protect, our culture, our environment. I mean, that's without us around, those elements would keep everything, the influence of those in their singular form and in compound forms would keep everything rejuvenated, recycled, in interaction with energy, of course, and with light. And so there's a symphony there, an orchestration of a partnership between the energy and elements that could create everything that's beneficial. But what we've done in Ohio just exemplifies this, is that we've got thousands of chemicals being transported all over the world constantly by ship and by land and air, and we're not only do we have these accidents happening, but we're purposely polluting the entire world with chemtrails, everywhere. I mean, every day there's situations like this going on, and this is the one that got the most coverage. But it's happening. Our farmers, they're dumping millions of gallons of comparable chemicals on their crops every year, and they're growing the food that feeds the world,
Right.
and we're eating it.
Right.
So this is a dilemma for the human race. We're literally committing suicide by titration. A little bit of poison here, a little bit. You go to the grocery store, 99% of the goods in there, have been chemicalized, and if it's chemicalized, it's poison. Mm-hmm. So that's the backstory to all this. And I think we need to see it from that big picture. So, and what are we going to do about it? It could get pretty negative when you look at that side of culture, but that's really what's, is this the transportation department's fault? Yes. Is it the train company's fault? Yes. Is it our fault? Yes. It's all of us. We're all responsible for this.
But let me add to that real quick, because as soon as this spill happened, and I was really, my wife, who's not even as dedicated to the task of looking into the research and reading everything, trying to reach out, trying to unpack the entire knot that is a single chemical spill, which, by the way, I don't think even got that great of coverage. I think people were so consumed with other things and they don't realize just how problematic these things are. But
yes,
like you said, we have planned, orchestrated chemical spills on our food systems every moment of every day. So who cares about a couple hundred, million gallons of some horrible vinyl chlorides or whatever spilled into our waterways? But I'm obviously being facetious here. So anyways, when I was talking to my wife about this, we have your under the sink unit, but now I was thinking, gosh, do we need to filter the whole house? We've got 2 babies, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. Do we want them bathing in water that maybe has harmful things that 40 years later is going to be causing multiple myeloma or lymphomas, leukemia, whatever? So you don't see the bad effects now, but maybe 100 years later, it'll be like a Rachel Carson kind of thing, Silent Spring, where suddenly somebody starts saying, and we finally put all these regulatory practices in place, but what happens from now until then? So I called up a friend who works for a large electrical company in Pittsburgh area. He's one of the he reminds me so much of you. He's super educated. He's also has always been very optimistic. However, when I called him about this, he was like, Nathan, he's the regulatory guy at the electrical company. A single person who comes in and says, we can't do this. We can't do this. This is, and so he doesn't have any friends at the company, but that's his important job. And he said, Nathan, there are so many, the Swiss cheese, there are so many layers to this problem. The only thing that you can do is protect you and your family using the best filtration system that you can find. So I immediately called up Zach, your son, and like I said, we got the house now. I've got a plumber coming. We have to do some plumbing work, but it's, I think, super worth it to do this for me. Not everybody maybe has the resources to do that, but if you do have the resources, maybe you don't need a greenfield water system, but the importance is that you understand that water is essential for your health. It's essential for growing healthy babies. It's essential for your fertility. It's essential for not getting cancer way too young in life. So maybe you can talk a little bit about why you got into water in the first place, because this is I think something that people are sort of neglectful about.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Well, I didn't get into natural healing modalities or natural foods or really a truly healthy lifestyle mindset until I was 50 years old. I just I had one time had a coffee house pub. I was a coffee roaster, and patrons would come in and say, "Why don't you offer organic coffee?" And I would act like I would say, "Well, what is that? What does that matter? It's coffee." I
Right.
just had no clue. But I knew I didn't like the medical system, but I didn't know why. I just know they. I mean, they didn't seem to heal, any of my ailments that I had. I didn't like the system, but I didn't understand it fully. I was too busy raising a family. But when I turned 50, we had a college student over for dinner one night, and she shared with us how her mother was healed of cancer by a raw food diet, and that was literally a pivoting moment in my life that it literally changed my life. It changed the course of my whole focus. And I spent 3 years. I hired her to teach me everything she knew about raw food preparation. She was a raw food chef, and after that, I just went down the rabbit hole of anything and everything I could learn about natural foods and natural healing modalities. And so I spent 3 years in intensive study. I didn't. I was fortunately I didn't. I even stopped working. That became my work. It was just became an absolute passion. And after 3 years of somebody invited me, I was dropping off a package at FedEx, and they invited me to this water ionizer demonstration. I had no idea what she was talking about. I didn't know what ionization was, and I hadn't studied water up to this point. I think I had just begun to read Schauberger at some point in there. So I was just trying to assimilate all this. So at the same time, I went to this presentation. It was a Kangen water demonstration, and it was very impressive. They showed the difference between what happened to water after it went through their machine and compared it to tap water. And while they're doing this, I'm looking at the machine saying it's plugged in the wall. How can that machine do something better? Nature can do it better. And I thought, I don't know how nature can do it better, but I know it can. And that sent me on a quest. I ended up actually traveling to Korea, which is they manufacture ceramic mineral balls, and I had looked into those as perhaps a way to ionize water in a natural way. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to meet with a medical professor who had healed his daughter of an ailment that the medical community couldn't heal, and he was using ceramic mineral balls in water. He was using water infused with information, basically.
Mineral ball
Which,
thing, right? Like they're actually physical balls that you put in the water.
yes, they were,
Oh,
yes, ceramic mineral balls. And as he was explaining the process to me, I had no idea what he was talking about, but I thought there's something to this. This is a very fortuitous meeting, and so I went on I took a tour of the ceramic mineral ball factory, and they gave me a water pitcher that I brought home with me, and it was just filled with minerals in this cartridge. And I took it back to the next water ionizer presentation. I said, can we compare the water from this little pitcher, this little $50 pitcher, with your $4,000 machine? I didn't use the money terms, but that's what I was thinking.
sure,
And
yeah.
so we did all the experiments that they had shown, comparing tap water to their ionizer. And on every one of them, the $50 pitcher outperformed their $4,000 ionizer. And so that just confirmed to me that my intuition was leading me in the right way. That
Yeah.
natural processes always trump what man creates, unless man is doing something to mimic nature purposely and with intent. It's going to have detrimental side effects. And so I did further studies on water ionization and came to the conclusion that a natural way of doing it was superior because there were no detrimental side effects as there would be with the water ionizer.
Yeah.
So that's what launched me into further study of water.
Let's talk just for a moment. I don't want to go too. I mean, we only have an hour to chat here, but gosh, Gary, I could ask you so many questions. So I will also add, my wife and I lived in Korea for a year before I went to medical school, and just being uh in a smaller town in Korea, let's say, near the ocean, near the mountains, the entire paradigm of how to be a human if you're living still a relatively traditional lifestyle in Korea, it's not even devoid of technology. It's just so different from the way that we live our lives that it's no surprise that at least up until recently, Korea was still one of the had the some of the greatest longevity of any nation. And we're not talking about North Korea, a very different story there, but Japan, Korea,
Right.
just a lot more immersion in nature, being with people. There's not a ton of processed foods, or at least probably is now, but it's no surprise to me that they would still be curious about how to optimize their water, drinking water. And I remember them teaching me about the rice. They would massage the rice, connect to the rice before they would
Mm.
place it into the rice cooker or whatever. I mean, some of these little traditional things, they go unnoticed. But anyways, that was a little diatribe. But you can learn a lot from East Asia, and I've brought a lot of those principles into my own practice and lifestyle. Um,
Yes.
with with just our short time in mind, I do want to get a little bit into Victor Schauberger, who is a third or fourth generation Austrian forester from back in the early 20th century. Probably was living around the time of Steiner and Max Planck. Like science was blowing up at the time, but Victor Schauberger's work as a forester I think largely went unnoticed. There's not too many people that speak about him. So when I heard you on Mimi and Chase's The Medicine podcast, and by the way, if you guys want some additional time with Gary, go and check out their podcast. They're amazing. And they really went into some great little crevices with you. Let's talk about the work of Victor Schauberger and specifically this idea of structuring water. I don't really like that word, but I want to try to clarify for people what this idea is. And I do think it probably stems from the work of Schauberger, but Gerald Pollack. I mean, a lot of people, even contemporary scientists are talking about water as more than just hydrogen, two hydrogens meet one oxygen. So I'll just open that prompt up for you about the structure of water.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It is a mystery because water in a structured state is still in a very dynamic state that's always moving.
Yeah.
There is always activity in water. I mean, and what modern science ignores about water are the invisible attributes of water, which the purpose of the physical container is to carry the invisible energies, and that's just a principle in nature. I mean, for instance, we ourselves, if we were just a physical entity, what would it be? It'd be just a blob of cells in all kinds of different configurations, which are, it's an absolute miracle, the human body. But if it was just the physical compilation, I mean, that in itself would be an amazing study to study every aspect. But apart from the energy that animates us and gives us not only movement, but even uniqueness, personality, that we all have. That's what really makes us what we are. And what carries that information within us is the water. Water is the biological computer. It carries the information, it holds the information, it receives information wherever water goes throughout nature, throughout the hydrological cycle, whether it's in the ground, on the land, or in the air. It is receiving information. And it's also it's also throwing off malformation, which is corrupted information, right? Corrupted energy. And so the whole purpose of water is to flow in its natural state, is to collect information as it goes throughout the environment, and then to bring it into our bodies, and then to bless us with all the information that it brought in. Then some of it comes in a physical form, or it's carried in a physical form within the elements, but it's the information that's being given off by those physical forms that enhances the human process or life processes.
Yeah.
And in the same way, the physical, even the water itself. Nature is so amazingly efficient in that water could not, water is a compilation of two gases, right? But when it's passing throughout, the outside environment, it's in a liquid state. Well, that facilitates its purpose. But once it gets into a life form, it splits, and that occurs through melanin reacting with solar energies to emit a frequency that splits the bond. It immediately creates an oxygen gas and a hydrogen gas. And so that now in a gaseous state, not only can it permeate in a liquid state, but not as effectively, but it has different purposes. There's multiple purposes with water. But at this point, now that gas permeates throughout all the cell membranes, it's an oxidizer, so it's cleaning. And then it's also an energizer with the hydrogen. So it's providing the energy source for all cell function. And at the same time as that energy is being expended, the cells are creating waste matter. And so it's being oxidized by the oxygen. And then what happens? They recombine. You have reverse photosynthesis happening within the human body that doesn't happen in a plant. So what happens? You get this continuously recombining and separating of oxygen and hydrogen gases into water to create this perfect balance of a pH. Because and by doing so, it keeps the body in this balanced state. So, and then as that liquid is in the liquid state, it will carry away the waste matter that's been oxidized by the oxygen in the gaseous state. So it's an amazing, intricate, relationship of and dynamic of just, a few elements, and how all they have to do is if they change their structure, and that's why I believe structure is a very important term. When they change their structure, they change their function, they change their attributes. And so the term structured water is just a term that water is in a chaotic state. I mean, it's in a dynamic state, but it can be a chaotically dynamic state, or it can be a structured dynamic state. And the way that it gets into that structured state, which is really just a natural condition or attribute of water without, the influence of our corrupt influences upon it, because we're the ones that corrupt the environment. It's not the environment itself or animals that corrupt it. It's us and our intent that corrupts that. But when that water vortexes, it's just a natural action. Even if you pour water down a piece of a window pane, just a flat piece of glass, it's not going to flow straight. It will wiggle. It will go in left and right turn spins, and that's like and in a 3D environment, it would be a vortex, be a toroidal vortex where it's spinning. Sometimes it's toroidal in that the left and right turn spin are together. Sometimes they're separate. But that's what is bringing structure to the water, and also bringing in energy, and also expending the malformation or the corrupted energy or the waste matter.
Yeah, I'll just throw in there. I'm studying anthroposophic medicine, which is it's a corollary of the body of work of Rudolf Steiner, and one of the big practices there is helping to answer the question of what is life. If you look at a rock and look at a plant, all living things, plants and even higher, mammals and humans, tend towards decay. It's sort of like, the law of thermodynamics and entropy at play here. We tend to disintegrate back into our constituent parts. So what is it that keeps us in form? What keeps us structured? A plant requires water. That's why you can cut flowers and they will still remain alive for some, or at least living in appearance for some period of time. But eventually this tendency towards entropy takes over and they disintegrate and decompose. The same goes for human beings. And if water is a living entity, what is it that provides that? We can call it negentropy. I think that Schrodinger was the one who coined that term. It's the opposite of entropy. That is really the answer of what is life. So if water is living, the question then would be, what gives it that living property? What helps to keep the water structured? what you're describing is the vortices in nature, whether it's in streams, through the humus, through the clay, this natural tendency of water to meander. And the way that it meanders is a reflection of its living energy. Like, this is what it is. And if you were to instead put it through 1,000 miles of lead piping, you're not going to have a living entity at the end of the line. Am I on the right track? Like,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, well, as you speak, the vortex is not in isolation, though. It's happening in an energized environment. We're surrounded by energy. It's ether, right?
Yeah.
And so that's an integral part, because without that ether, I mean, water would have no life to it, no activity to it. What brings the activity, what brings the benefits, is all the energy that's in the environment. But it's not that, but that energy, we can't know that energy without a physical form, and we can't know the physical form without the energy. And when I say that, I mean, not only, the visible light is one tiny, tiny part of that energetic spectrum, but that's what allows us to visualize, physical entities, which is, so it's it's the energy that reveals the matter, but without matter, we couldn't know what energy is. Mm-hmm. So, and then the way that energy manifests itself depends on the form, and it's based on a principle: form, frequency, and function. It's like a musical instrument. All the elements of the periodic table, in their singular form and in compound forms, are musical instruments. And if they're formed in a natural way, they're putting off natural music, which is beautiful. They're perfectly tuned when they're in their proper, when they're in the state that was given to them by the creator. Like, it was like a Stradivarius violin that was built by a master violin, woodmaker. And in the same way, our creator masterfully created all of these musical instruments, which manifest themselves as elements in various forms. And as the ether interacts with those various forms, it creates music, it creates frequency, it creates a life-enhancing energy. And so that's why it's, we call the universe. It's one verse. It's a beautiful unified verse in its natural state. It's putting off beautiful music. So wherever you go in nature, whether it's listening to a waterfall as water trickles down, it could be a huge waterfall, it could be a small one. It's just a different form of music. It could be the wind rustling through the trees in a hurricane, or in just a gentle breeze. It's different forms of music that have different functions in nature. So everything in nature has a beautiful core. It's a beautiful chorus. It's a beautiful orchestration. It's a beautiful symphony.